I'm the author Maggie Shaw, and here is a seasonal reading from my book Diviner's Nemesis 2, Retribution. Dr. Alec Graham was working in his book-lined study when the call he had been expecting came through from his driver, Theo. "Sandy Angus is back from Bar," Theo confirmed. "I followed him from Victoria to Downey Road. He went into number 15. Sam's keeping tabs in case he comes out again." "I'll come straight over. Meet you outside number 21. Alec put away the potsherd symbols he had been classifying for a colleague and slipped on a heavy overcoat against the cold, cloudy, late December day. He looked into the lounge on his way out to tell his wife Liz he had been called away on business. She was lying asleep on the sofa beneath a handful of magazines, her black hair cascading over the arm, her heart-shaped face gently lit by the coloured lights on the tall Christmas tree nearby. Rather than disturb her, he left a message with the housekeeper in case Liz awoke later and wondered where he was. He sped off in his black Lincoln Continental sedan, hoping to get to the address before Sandy Angus had flown again. Downey Road was a hybrid street with modern tall apartment blocks at one end and Victorian weathered brick terraces at the other. Theo had parked his maroon Honda Civic hatchback outside number 10 to watch number 15, his curly head pressed against the seat to make himself less visible. Beside him in the passenger seat sat his sandy-haired colleague, Sam. Alec opened the near-side rear door and slid onto the back seat. The house they were watching was grimy and soot-streaked with unwashed curtains behind dusty windows and a peeling brown front door. It was not the sort of house a man like Sandy Angus would choose to live in, while his wealthier friends had a bedroom to spare. Alec suspected either a decoy or a trap. "Has anyone entered or left the house since you phoned?" he asked. They shook their heads in reply. He nodded. "Sam, check the back of the house. Keep an eye on things there. I'll watch the front from the Lincoln until I'm sure it's safe to go in. Theo, cover me." Nothing moved for half an hour after they had repositioned. Alec began to fear his quarry had long since given them the slip. He checked his revolver, concealed it in the pocket of his grey velvet suit, wrapped a scarf loosely around his bearded face, and strolled across the street to the dilapidated house. At first, his forceful knock raised no answer. Then he heard the shuffle of elderly feet. An impoverished, arthritic old man opened the door to him. "You took a long time getting here, Dr. Graham. You better come in," the man said abruptly in a South London accent, competing against his squealing hearing aid. "How did you know I was coming?" Alec demanded, signalling to Theo behind his back to follow him inside. The old man tried to adjust his hearing aid and took it out in disgust. Without comment, he turned his back on the open front door. He stiffly led the way along the tiled hall and up the narrow wooden stairs. Alec followed cautiously, reassured that Theo would be right behind him. As he reached the top of the stairs, the front door slammed. Startled, he turned to upbraid Theo, but found no one below. A cough made him look back up. The old man pushed open the back bedroom door. Alec stepped warily inside and came face to face with Jonathan Keast. The wealthy businessman was like a surreal imposition in the dusty, bare room, so out of keeping with his surroundings that he was the last person Alec had expected to see there despite the elaborate nature of the trap. Keast had been standing by the cracked window, his bearded chin resting on his right hand as he watched Sam hiding in the overgrown black garden. Between him and the door stood the only piece of furniture, a dusty, broken treadle sewing machine, on top of which lay a large manila envelope. Keast gestured to Alec to come in further. He complied and shut the door behind him for protection, his hand on the butt of the revolver in his pocket, his footsteps resounding hollowly on the bare floorboards. "Use your gun if you wish, Dr. Graham, but I assure you that if you do, you will not leave this house alive." "Don't you intend that anyway, Mr. Keast?" Alec thought twice about his uncertain position, and with contemptuous glower at his adversary turned back for the door. "Wait, Dr. Graham. I suggest you learn why I arranged for us to meet here before you leave. After all, you wouldn't want your wife to know what really happened when your father died." "She already knows the truth, as you learnt when you kidnapped her." "Only your version of the truth. It is easy enough to place blame on a dead drug addict who can no longer answer for himself." "To her he can, Mr. Keast, and she knows quite well where the blame lies, not on the poor helpless drug addict, but the man who sold him the drugs. Is this name-calling the only reason you lured me here? I would have thought trading family insults a dangerous game to play, considering how your affluent wife committed suicide some 19 years ago, and your meteoric rise from obscurity to power, which is scattered with corpses, none of which can quite be linked back to you." "The unsubstantiated allegations of a government man. Did you tell your wife about that too? The trips to Chile, the Middle East, Glasgow and Crete, at such significant times with your team of licensed executioners?" Keast's grasp of the facts from the little Liz had told him 4 months before under duress alarmed Alec, though he took care to conceal his reaction and its implied admission. Keast was getting too dangerous, but still his leverage in political circles was enough to prevent Alec's brother Philip getting the permission to remove him and end his doubtful influence in European business circles and British affairs. The only way to obtain that permission was to gain convincing proof of Keast's depravity, or otherwise to catch him red-handed in the crossfire. But once again, even with the evidence obtained from members of the Psychic Society Psi since Liz had deposed him, Keast had still managed to keep at least one step away from any criminal proof. Dangerous men require dangerous methods, Alec thought, and resolved to bait a trap himself to gather the evidence to destroy Keast. He started with a natural defense. "Government what, Mr. Keast? I don't know what you're talking about. I am an archaeologist specializing in symbolism and considered by many to be an authority in my field. I get dozens of invitations to visit universities and museums all over the world. If these visits are occasionally at significant times, that is purely coincidental." Keast studied his face for several seconds after he had spoken, his expression disbelieving. At length he said, "Isn't it unfortunate then, Dr. Graham, that I have proof of your involvement in the torching of a factory in San Diego and a pool hall in Glasgow? The envelope beside you contains copies of some of my evidence, photographs with the witness testimony of the photographer who has since died in a bar brawl in Hong Kong. How convenient for you. You always did have a way with cameras. Alec picked up the envelope from the sewing machine and studied its contents. One of the 6 photographs inside was particularly incriminating. A view of Alec standing to the left of some factory gates at night, his bearded face lit by the flames as the work's name panel flamed with the blazing building. Again, Alec bluffed a lack of concern to find out whether Keast had any more evidence. He tore the envelope with its contents in half and dropped them to the floor. 10% of nothing for another spectator. Mr. Keast, why are you trying to blackmail me? What is it you want that you will not mention until you have found some leverage against me? I already have the leverage, Dr. Graham. I trade silence for silence. Choose not to testify against Douglas Angus, and I shall choose not to incriminate you where it would do the most damage. What, you plead for the surviving Angus twin? Alec was astonished that Keast should think the assassin that valuable. In the circumstances, it's a solution I find preferable to his, disemboweling you to stop you testifying against him permanently. He is waiting outside the door for your decision. Alec nodded thoughtfully and placed a psychic wall around his mind, as Liz had taught him, to conceal his intention to deceive as he prepared the trap which he hoped would place both Keast and Sandy Angus in his grasp. I am willing to barter, Mr. Keast. However, I would expect a far more important guarantee than that alone for the price of my silence. Keast had felt the psychic barrier go up and sensed at once that Alec intended deceit. He played along to bluff him in return. Excellent, Dr. Graham. I knew you would be a man who responds to reason. What is your price? You leave my wife alone. Keast studied Alec's expression, at a loss to understand what sort of duplicity he was attempting in giving his enemy such a challenge. It suggested that his attitude towards his wife was one of pure possession, with no element of love. Keast recalled some gossip he had heard about a young salesman Alec had recently transferred to Greyplax, a company about to be linked with Psy. He decided to test Alec's jealousy with a taunt. Finding the requested guarantee easy to make for one who was selective about the pledges he kept, he shook his hand. Certainly, Dr. Graham. I believe I forgot to congratulate you on your marriage at the time. Such an amenable young woman, I found, especially the last time I met her. When was it? Ah, yes, in Psy's theatre, the day Rolf Kruger and Sandy Angus died. But you look puzzled. Surely Liz didn't forget to tell you about our little rendezvous. Alec glowered at him in contempt and turned to go. Keast laughed at his back and called out to Angus to let him pass. Alec left Downey Road and drove home with Sam and Theo following on behind. Before he could proceed any further, he knew he had to contact his brother Philip about the developments and their implications. The 2 cars arrived back at Briarbank less than 3 hours after Alec had left, without Liz noticing their absence. She woke up on the lounge sofa when Alec slammed the front door and went into the hall to greet him with a kiss. Despite the heaviness of sleep in her eyes, she still looked model perfect in her maroon velvet Sabatina dress. "Chasing next door's cat again?" she asked. It was his usual reason for slamming the front door. As he returned her kiss, he remembered Keast's parting statement. Feelings of betrayal coursed through him. So, she had not told him about meeting Keast that last time, had she? Then, he rationalized, he need not tell her about the trap he had laid for Keast, or feel any guilt about setting her up as the bait. "Yes, dear," he lied, knowing she trusted him too much to pry. She sensed his estrangement, but sleepily presumed the cat had won again, and returned to her magazines in the lounge, while he retired to the study, not to sulk, as she thought, but to contact Philip by phone.